She said it was on her desk. 4 words, on the record, in front of cameras. Then the Department of Justice said it didn't exist. That's not a miscommunication. That's not a staffing error. That's 2 completely different statements from the same office about the same document, and somebody in that building is lying. This is the story of the list that appeared, disappeared, and then showed up in the hands of people who were never supposed to have it. Let's start with the statement that started everything. Attorney General Pam Bondi, in a moment that went immediately viral, told the public that the Epstein list was sitting on her desk, not under review, not being processed, on her desk, present tense, accessible, real. The implication was clear. The names of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged clients, powerful men whose identities have been protected for decades, were inches away from becoming public. The Attorney General of the United States had them. She knew what was in them, and she was apparently ready to talk about it. Then something happened. Within days, the Department of Justice issued a statement walking it back. There is no list. Those were the words. Not the list is under review. Not the list is classified. There is no list. A flat denial of something the Attorney General had just confirmed existed. 2 statements. 1 office. One of them is a lie. But here's where the story stops being about a miscommunication and starts being about something far more deliberate. Because that same week, while the DOJ was telling the public the list didn't exist, a group of people were photographed holding it. Not senators. Not federal investigators. Not the oversight committee that had been requesting these documents for months. Social media influencers. Republican content creators with large followings and no security clearance were photographed at a White House event holding sleek black binders labeled Part 1, The Epstein Files. They posted the photos went viral. The binders were real enough to photograph, real enough to generate headlines, and real enough to hand to people whose primary job is producing content for clicks. Congress got nothing. Influencers got binders. That sequence of events is not accidental. Someone decided who saw what and when. Someone printed those binders, organized that event, and handed out those folders while simultaneously telling the public through official DOJ channels that no list existed. Those 2 decisions were made by the same institution on the same week, and the contradiction between them is not a communications failure, it is a strategy. Representative Moskowitz saw it immediately. He laid out the timeline in a congressional hearing with the kind of precision that made everyone in that room uncomfortable. Bondi says the list is on her desk. DOJ says there is no list. Influencers get binders. Congress gets nothing. The White House calls efforts to release the files a hostile act. Hostile. That was the word used internally to describe a congressional effort to release documents about one of the worst sex trafficking operations in modern American history. Not premature. Not legally complicated. Hostile. Think about what it takes to call transparency a hostile act. It means the people using that word have decided that the information in those files is more dangerous to them than the political cost of blocking it. It means they have done the calculation and concluded that protecting whatever is in those pages is worth the optics of obstructing a congressional discharge petition. That calculation only makes sense if what's in those pages is genuinely dangerous to someone with enough influence to make that call. Moskowitz kept going. Because the contradictions didn't stop with the list, they kept multiplying. Republicans on the Rules Committee voted against releasing the files. Then, when their own base turned on them for that vote, they refused to return to the committee. Congress left a day early. The administration sent the Deputy Attorney General, Trump's former personal lawyer, to visit Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. No announcement, no public log, no statement. Within days of that visit, Maxwell was transferred to a minimum security facility. Officially routine. Unofficially, the timing was impossible to ignore. And then the leaks stopped. For months, internal documents, redacted names, and DOJ memos had been finding their way into the press. After that prison visit, the flow dried up overnight. The Epstein headlines faded, the outrage cycle moved on, and the story began to disappear into the same institutional silence that has protected it for decades. This is the pattern. Not chaos, not incompetence. A repeating sequence of controlled information release, strategic contradiction, and perfectly timed distraction that has played out every single time the Epstein case has threatened to reach the people at the top. In 2008, a secret plea deal ended a federal investigation before it could name anyone above Epstein himself. Alex Acosta, the prosecutor who made that deal, later said he had been told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. In 2019, Epstein was arrested again. He was dead within weeks. The security footage disappeared. The guards were asleep. The autopsy raised questions that were never publicly resolved. And now in 2025, the Attorney General confirms a list exists. The DOJ denies it. Influencers get the binders. Congress gets blocked. And the White House calls the entire effort to release the files a hostile act. Same pattern. Different year. But here's what's different this time. The contradictions are on the record. Bondi's statement is on tape. The influencer photos are publicly archived. The DOJ denial is documented. The White House's hostile act characterization has been entered into congressional testimony. Moskowitz put all of it on the record in a single hearing, building a timeline that is now permanently part of the official government record. You can't unsay what's been said. You can't unphotograph what's been photographed. And you can't unenter what's been entered into the congressional record. The list exists. Bondi confirmed it. The DOJ denied it. The binders proved it. And the effort to block its release revealed exactly how much is at stake for the people whose names are inside it. Because here's the thing about the Epstein list. It was never really about Epstein. Epstein is dead. His crimes are documented. His conviction is on record. The list matters because of what it represents, a direct connection between his operation and the most powerful people on Earth, people who are still alive, still powerful, still protected. Every contradiction, every denial, every carefully timed distraction is not about protecting Epstein's memory. It's about protecting those people, the ones whose names Bondi had on her desk, the ones whose names ended up in binders handed to social media influencers, the ones whose names have never once appeared in a law enforcement press release, despite being documented in official FBI interview reports. Moskowitz asked the question nobody wanted to answer. If this were your daughter, your sister, your friend, would you still call this politics? Nobody answered, because answering that question meant admitting that somewhere along the way, justice stopped being about people and started being about preservation, the preservation of reputations, of relationships, of the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself to be effective. The list was on her desk, then it wasn't, then it was in the hands of influencers, then it was a hostile act to ask for it back. And somewhere in that sequence, the truth about who was on it got a little further from the people it was supposed to reach. The survivors are still waiting. The names are still protected, and the list that Bondi said was on her desk is still the most dangerous document in Washington. Not because of what it contains, but because of what releasing it would mean for the people who have spent decades making sure it never sees daylight.